Gunfire echoed through the valley like thunder chasing the wind. Men shouted in languages that no longer mattered. Sergeant Ethan Cole pressed his body against the wet earth, breathing through the taste of mud and smoke. Around him, the last of his unit was falling back, but the line had already broken. Orders were lost to the storm of bullets. The radio crackled once, then died. For a moment he thought the silence meant safety, until a burst of fire tore through the trees beside him. He ran. His legs felt heavy, soaked with rain and blood that might have been his own. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Somewhere behind him, a flare went up, painting the sky red. He turned toward the river, hoping to find cover, but the sound of engines grew louder. He stopped when the light hit his face. 10 rifles aimed at him. He lifted his hands. The mud clung to his palms like the weight of defeat. They stripped him of his gear and dragged him through the darkness. He tried not to look back at the bodies on the ground. The rain hid his tears, or maybe it just added to them. When dawn came, he was tied to a truck with 5 others, none from his unit. The road twisted through mountains, narrow and silent. The prisoners didn't speak. They only looked at each other with the same question in their eyes: what happens next? After hours of silence, the truck stopped before tall metal gates. The sign above was in a language he couldn't read, but he didn't need to. The smell of fear was enough. The guards pushed them inside a place that wasn't meant for life. Broken walls, rusted wire, watchtowers like vultures waiting for a meal. Someone whispered, "Welcome to hell." Days blurred. The food was gray, the nights colder than stone. Ethan watched men fade, not from wounds but from the slow hunger of hopelessness. Every morning they were counted, shouted at, sometimes beaten. He learned to stay quiet, to observe. He noticed the rhythm of the guards' boots, the shift change, the way the dogs barked seconds before patrols turned corners. He kept these details in his mind like pieces of a map no one else could see. One night, he sat in the corner of his cell, tracing lines in the dirt with his finger. The guard outside glanced in and smirked. "Still thinking you're free, soldier?" Ethan didn't answer. He just kept drawing lines that disappeared as fast as he made them. In those moments, freedom was a shape he could almost remember. A man in the next cell whispered through the wall, his voice rough and low. "You planning something?" Ethan didn't respond right away. Finally, he whispered back, "Only living." The man gave a quiet laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Name's Reyes," he said. "If you find a way out, don't forget me." Ethan didn't promise anything. Promises were dangerous here. Days turned into weeks. The guards grew careless, thinking the prisoners had accepted their fate. But every small cruelty added fuel to a fire Ethan kept hidden. When they forced him to carry crates near the gate, he counted his steps. When they made him dig trenches, he memorized where the soil was softest. Freedom was not a dream, it was data, patterns, timing. At night, he thought of home. His mother's porch light, the sound of crickets, the voice of his little brother asking when he'd come back. He held those memories like a match in the dark. They reminded him he was still human. Sometimes he whispered to himself, "You're not done yet." One morning, Captain Voss entered the yard. The man's uniform was clean, his boots polished, his eyes colder than steel. He spoke through a translator, saying the prisoners would be useful labor. But Ethan heard what wasn't said. They were tools, not men. Voss's gaze stopped on Ethan, studying him longer than the rest. A smile touched his lips, cruel and small. "Some soldiers never learn when the war is over," he said. Ethan looked away, but inside, something answered, "Some wars never end." That night, the rain came again. The guards shouted, herding men into shelters, but Ethan stayed outside, letting the water wash over him. He looked up at the towers, the lights sweeping across the yard. Somewhere, deep in his chest, he made a silent vow. He would not die behind these walls. The thunder rolled, and for a heartbeat, the lights flickered. He counted how long before they came back. 3 seconds. He smiled faintly in the dark. 3 seconds could be everything. Have you ever felt that small spark, The one that refuses to die, even when everything else does? The kind that whispers, "Not yet"? Ethan felt it that night. He didn't know when or how, but he knew one thing: he was going to escape. And when he did, he'd make them remember his name. The rain slowed. The dogs barked once, then quieted. Inside the cell, Ethan lay on the cold floor, eyes open, mind awake. Somewhere beyond the fence, the world still existed: trees, rivers, freedom. He could almost smell it. He whispered to the darkness, "I'm coming." And though no one heard him, something in the night shifted, like the first breath of a storm not yet begun. The mornings in the camp all felt the same. The whistle would scream, and men would rise from the ground like ghosts pulled from graves. Ethan stopped counting the days after the first month. Counting only made the walls feel taller. The guards shouted, the gates clanged, and the same gray soup was poured into the same dented bowls. It wasn't food, it was a reminder that they were still alive, but barely. Reyes worked beside him most days, shoveling dirt for trenches that seemed to lead nowhere. "You ever think they'll let us go?" he asked one morning. Ethan didn't answer. Hope was a fragile thing here. You didn't speak it out loud. Reyes spat into the mud and muttered, "Didn't think so." Later that day, Ethan saw something new. A truck arrived with supplies, and one of the guards fumbled with the latch on the gate. In that brief second, Ethan noticed how the chain swung wide, how it stuck slightly before locking. A small detail, but he stored it away. Freedom wasn't found in open doors, it was hidden in moments like that. Nights were worse. The cold bit deeper, and the wind carried the cries of men who dreamed of home. Some begged in their sleep. Some didn't wake at all. Ethan lay awake listening to the rhythm of boots outside his cell, measuring the time between each step. Every sound mattered. Every silence, too. A week later, a new prisoner arrived, a tall, quiet man with eyes that never seemed to blink. The guards called him Merrick. He didn't talk much, but he watched everything. During one of their work shifts, Merrick whispered, "You're studying them, aren't you?" Ethan looked up, caught off guard. "I see how you count their steps," Merrick said. "You're not broken yet." Ethan's first instinct was to deny it, but something in Marek's calm voice told him he could trust him. They started sharing silent nods across the yard. Merrick showed him which guards were lazy, which ones drank on duty. Reyes caught on too, though his courage wavered. "If they catch us," he said one night, "they'll make us disappear." Ethan replied quietly, "We already disappeared the day they locked us in." Sometimes, Ethan caught sight of Captain Voss watching from his office window, always clean, always distant. There was something in that gaze, cold satisfaction, as if Voss was feeding on their suffering. Ethan forced himself not to look away. To win against a man like that, you had to let him believe you'd given up. One evening, while unloading crates near the fence, Ethan saw it again, the loose chain. The guard who handled it was half asleep, his hands trembling from drink. Ethan's heart pounded, but he kept his face calm. Not yet. Patience was his only weapon. He needed more than luck. He needed timing. Merrick began sketching rough layouts of the camp in the dirt with a stick, his hand moving quickly before a guard could see. "The spotlight misses this corner for 3 seconds every turn," he whispered. Ethan nodded. 3 seconds can be enough. The plan was forming, piece by piece, like a puzzle made of risk and desperation. One night, Reyes couldn't sleep. He whispered through the dark, "You really think we can do this?" Ethan's voice was steady. "If we don't, this place will eat what's left of us." Reyes sighed. "Then let's starve on our feet, not on our knees." The next morning, Ethan woke to find a new group of prisoners being dragged in, some too weak to walk. One collapsed near his feet, a boy barely old enough to shave. Ethan helped lift him, but a guard struck him across the back. He didn't fight back, didn't even look up. But inside, the fire grew hotter. He'd seen enough men die to know the difference between survival and surrender. That night, lightning cracked across the sky. The storm drowned the sound of footsteps, and for the first time in months, the guards stayed close to the barracks instead of the yard. Ethan watched through the slit in his wall, memorizing the shadows that danced in the light. "Storms," Merrick whispered from the next cell. "They hide noise." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then maybe they'll hide us." He started timing the intervals of thunder, the flashes of light, the distance between them. Each one a heartbeat closer to something impossible. Freedom was starting to look real again, even if only as a dream that refused to fade. But dreams in this place came at a cost. 2 men had tried running weeks earlier. The guards found them by morning. The rest of the prisoners were forced to watch what came next. Ethan could still hear their screams, could still see the look on Captain Voss's face, cold, calm, unflinching. That memory was carved into his mind like a scar. Still, he planned. Still, he waited. And when the nights were quiet and the guards drunk, he let himself whisper to the darkness. "Not much longer." Have you ever had a moment when every cell in your body screamed to move, but you knew waiting was the hardest part? That was Ethan now. A wolf trapped behind wire, teeth clenched, eyes wide open. Merrick passed him a note scratched on a scrap of cloth. "Tomorrow. After the 3rd bell." Ethan hid it beneath the straw. His pulse quickened, but his face stayed calm. He went through the motions that day, shoveling, eating, pretending. Every second felt heavier, as if time itself was testing him. When the 3rd bell rang that night, the camp fell silent. The rain returned, just as he hoped. Ethan pressed his back against the cold wall, eyes fixed on the gate beyond the mud. Somewhere, a dog barked once and then stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath. He whispered to himself, "It starts now." And for the first time in months, the thought didn't feel like a dream. It felt like the truth. The rain came down hard that night, masking every sound with its endless rhythm. Ethan's fingers trembled as he tied the laces on his worn boots, mud already seeping through the cracks. Beside him, Marek's face was set like stone. Reyes whispered, "If we die out there, I'm haunting you, Ethan." Ethan smiled faintly. "If we die out there, at least it won't be in here." The 3rd bell had echoed minutes ago. The guards were lazy, cold, and half asleep from cheap liquor. The storm had driven them into the barracks. The timing was perfect, or as perfect as it could ever be in a place built for hopeless men. Ethan crawled from the shadows of his hut, keeping low. The rain stung his face like needles, but he welcomed it. It blurred the floodlights, turned everything into shifting ghosts. Merrick followed close, each movement silent and deliberate. Reyes lagged a step behind, whispering prayers under his breath. They reached the trench line, just 30 yards from the gate. The mud sucked at their boots, and every step felt like a fight against the earth itself. Ethan stopped, raising a hand. 2 guards stood by the gatehouse, their cigarettes glowing faintly in the dark. The chain on the gate swayed in the wind, the same one Ethan had watched for weeks. "Wait," Merrick whispered. The guards started arguing, voices slurred, impatient. One dropped his cigarette, cursed, and stomped it out. The other laughed and turned away. That was their moment. Ethan sprinted the last few feet, heart hammering so hard it drowned out the thunder. His fingers worked fast on the latch. It stuck for a moment, just as he'd expected. He twisted hard. The lock gave. The gate creaked open an inch, then 2. Reyes was breathing too loud. "Come on," Ethan hissed. They slipped through, one by one, into the open night beyond the fence. The air smelled different there, wet, wild, real. For a second, Ethan felt alive again. Free. But freedom has a cruel sense of humor. A shout tore through the rain, a guard's voice. The chain had slipped, the gate clanged shut, and the sound echoed across the camp. Lights flickered on. Dogs barked. A siren began to wail. "Run!" Ethan yelled. They ran. Mud splashed, branches tore at their faces, the forest ahead swallowing them whole. Behind them, gunfire cracked through the night. Bullets hissed past like angry bees. Reyes stumbled but kept moving, his breath ragged. Merrick led the way through the trees, weaving between shadows. The ground was uneven, slick, and full of hidden roots. One wrong step could break an ankle, or worse. They ran for what felt like hours. The sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by the steady drum of rain. When they finally stopped, gasping for breath, Ethan turned to Reyes. "You hit?" Reyes shook his head. "Not yet." Merrick knelt, checking their bearings. "There's a river east," he said. "If we follow it, it'll wash away our tracks." Ethan nodded. They started moving again, slower now, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion. At dawn, the rain stopped. Mist hung low over the trees. Ethan's uniform was torn, his hands raw from crawling. They found a hollow beneath a fallen log and crawled inside. For a few minutes, no one spoke. The silence was heavy but sacred. Reyes broke it first. "We actually made it out." Ethan smiled faintly. "Halfway out," he said. "The rest is survival." They had no food, no maps, and no sense of how far the camp was from the nearest village. But they had air that didn't smell of sweat and despair. For now, that was enough. As they rested, Ethan thought of home, his mother's porch, the smell of coffee, the sound of laughter. Things that felt more like memories from another lifetime. "We're going to make it," he whispered, almost to himself. Merrick looked at him and said, "Don't promise what you can't control." Hours passed. They followed the riverbank, drinking from the current, hiding from the open fields. Every rustle made them freeze. Every crow that cried overhead sounded like a warning. By sunset, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. Smoke rose from somewhere beyond the trees, maybe a farmhouse. Maybe soldiers. They couldn't be sure. "We should go around," Merrick said. But Reyes shook his head. "We need food. Shelter. Anything." Ethan made the call. "We wait till dark, then move." As night fell again, the forest grew colder. They descended the ridge quietly, hearts pounding with every step. When they reached the clearing, they saw it, a small cabin, light flickering inside. An old man stood by the doorway, tending a fire. Ethan hesitated. "We can't risk it," he whispered. But Reyes was already stepping forward. "If he reports us, we're dead," Ethan said. "If we don't eat, we're dead anyway," Reyes replied. The decision was made. Ethan followed, staying close to the shadows. The old man turned when he heard them, his face lined with years of hard living. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan raised his hands. "We don't mean harm. We just need help." The old man studied them, his eyes sharp and cautious. "You're from the camp," he said softly. "I've seen the smoke, heard the dogs." Ethan didn't deny it. The man sighed. "You shouldn't have come here. They'll be looking." Still, he opened the door wider. "Come in before the cold kills you." Inside, the warmth was almost unbearable after so many months in the cold. The man gave them bread, water, and a place to sit. Merrick kept his eyes on the door, never relaxing. Ethan ate slowly, watching the man's every move. After a while, the old man spoke again. "I had a son once. Fought in the war. Never came back. Maybe helping you fools will make up for something." He smiled sadly. "Sleep while you can. The patrols will search by morning." Ethan barely slept. He kept thinking about the camp, about Captain Voss, about what he'd do when he found out they'd escaped. He knew this wasn't over, not even close. By dawn, they were gone again, slipping back into the forest. The old man's cabin faded behind them like a ghost. But fate has a way of catching up to those who run too long. 2 days later, as they crossed a muddy field, they heard the sound of engines. Trucks. Voices. Dogs. The army had found their trail. Merrick turned to Ethan. "We split. It's the only chance." Ethan nodded reluctantly. 3 directions. Meet at the old river bend in 2 nights. They scattered. Ethan sprinted through the trees, branches tearing at his arms. Gunfire erupted again. He dove into a ditch, mud splashing over him. A voice shouted nearby. Footsteps crunched closer. He held his breath, body trembling. A flashlight beam passed inches from his face. Then silence. The men moved on. When night came again, Ethan made his way to the river bend. He waited. An hour passed. Then 2. No one came. Merrick never arrived. Reyes never arrived. Ethan was alone. The forest around him was quiet now, too quiet. And deep inside he knew the hunt wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan woke to the sound of boots crunching nearby. Cold steel pressed against his neck before he even opened his eyes. "Move!" a voice growled. His heart dropped. The soldiers had found him. They dragged him through the mud, bound his hands, and threw him into the back of a truck. Rain fell again, heavy and unrelenting. As the truck jolted forward, he looked out the small slit in the door. The forest faded behind him like a dream he could never return to. Hours later, the gates of the prison appeared through the mist. The same barbed wire, the same watchtowers, the same faces staring with hollow eyes. Only now, Ethan wasn't one of them. He was something worse, a failed escapee. The guards threw him into the mud as the camp commander stepped forward. "Captain Voss." His cold eyes didn't blink once. "You disappoint me, Lieutenant," he said softly. Ethan said nothing. He knew speaking would only make things worse. Voss crouched beside him. "You thought you could outsmart me? You thought you were free?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried no warmth. "You will wish you had died out there." The punishment was merciless. Days in solitary. No food, no light, no sound except his own breathing. They called it the hole. It was barely a cell, just a pit in the ground, damp and foul. Ethan sat there for what felt like weeks, his thoughts twisting and unraveling. He stopped counting the hours. He stopped hoping for rescue. Sometimes he heard footsteps above. Sometimes laughter. The guards liked to throw scraps of bread into the mud, just to watch him scramble for them. He stopped reacting. That was the only power he had left, his silence. One night, the hatch opened. A guard dropped a small canteen of water. Ethan took it slowly. On the side of the canteen, scratched into the metal, were faint letters. "Still alive?" His breath caught. Merrick. Somehow, Merrick had survived. Somehow, he was still out there, or maybe even back in the camp. That tiny message reignited something Ethan thought he had lost: hope. The next morning, he was dragged from the hole and thrown before Voss again. "You've had enough time to think," Voss said. "Tell me who helped you." Ethan stared straight ahead. "No one." Voss's fist struck him across the jaw. Blood filled his mouth. "You think this is bravery? You're not protecting anyone. You're just prolonging your pain." Ethan spat blood onto the ground. "Maybe pain is the only thing that still makes sense." Voss's face twisted. Back to the hole. He spent another week in darkness. But this time, he wasn't broken. Every day, he traced Marek's initials in the mud, repeating them like a prayer. "Still alive." When they finally pulled him out, his body was weak but his mind sharper than ever. He saw every guard's routine differently now, their timing, their habits, their blind spots. The first escape had been desperate. The next one would be precise. They assigned him to maintenance duty again, believing he was too broken to fight back. But as Ethan walked past the fence line each morning, he studied every inch of it. The way the sun hit the towers. The rhythm of the watchlights. The moments when the world forgot to watch. He noticed a new face among the prisoners, thin, pale, but familiar eyes. Merrick. Somehow, he had been caught too. They met briefly during roll call. No words, just a look. That was enough. At night, Ethan lay awake, his mind racing. The thought repeated over and over: there's always a second way out. The next week, he learned that a supply truck entered through the back gate every 3 days. The guards checked under it, but not inside the crates it carried out. That's where it would happen. Quietly. No running this time. No sirens. He waited. Observed. Counted every second. Then one evening, as the sky burned orange, Merrick walked by carrying a crate. Their eyes met again, and Ethan gave the faintest nod. The plan was wordless, but both understood. The next morning, when the truck rolled in, Ethan was ready. His hands didn't shake this time. Every motion was deliberate, silent, cold. He slipped inside one of the crates while the workers loaded supplies. Merrick closed it behind him, sealing him into darkness. The air was thin. Every breath hurt. The sound of boots and shouting outside grew distant. Then the truck lurched forward. The gate creaked open. For a few seconds, he couldn't tell if he was alive or dreaming. The truck rolled out of the compound. For the first time in months, the sound of the gate closing came from the outside. He held his breath as the vehicle bounced over dirt roads. Hours passed. He didn't move. He couldn't. Sweat ran down his face, soaking the fabric beneath him. When the truck finally stopped, the back doors opened. Two men began unloading crates. Ethan waited for the moment they turned away. Then, he pushed. The lid creaked open. Sunlight blinded him. He rolled out silently, landing behind a stack of boxes. His legs felt like fire, but his heart thundered with the taste of freedom. The men didn't see him. The moment they walked away, he crawled through the shadows and slipped into the woods beyond the camp's supply post. The air smelled like pine and rain. The sound of the wind was the sweetest thing he'd ever heard. He was free. Again. But this time, there would be no mistakes. No stopping. No trusting anyone. He moved through the forest until nightfall, every step a battle against exhaustion. When the stars came out, he looked up at them and whispered, "Merrick, I'll come back for you." And as he walked deeper into the dark, the thought that had haunted him from the start returned: freedom always comes with a price. Ethan moved through the forest like a shadow, every step cautious, every sound a threat. The moon hung low between the trees, pale and distant, casting thin silver light over the wet earth. His clothes were torn, his body weak, but his will had sharpened into something unbreakable. For the first time in months, he could breathe without fear of hearing boots behind him. Yet that silence frightened him more than any guard ever had. Because silence meant he was alone. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The cold crept into his bones like poison. His boots were soaked, his fingers numb. He found a stream and drank greedily, the icy water burning his throat. It didn't matter. It was freedom, and it tasted alive. The forest stretched endlessly ahead, and with every mile, the shadows seemed to whisper his name. He had escaped twice, but he knew what that meant. The army would never stop hunting him. A man who defied them twice wasn't a fugitive anymore. He was a ghost they needed to erase. As dawn approached, he reached an open field scattered with fog. In the distance, smoke rose from a chimney. A village. Civilization. Danger and hope all tangled together. He crouched low, watching from the tree line. Farmers worked the fields, unaware of the hunted man watching them. He needed food. He needed warmth. But more than anything, he needed information. When night fell again, Ethan slipped into the village. Dogs barked faintly, then fell silent. He moved between houses, careful, silent. From a window, he saw a family eating dinner, bread, soup, laughter. The sight made his heart ache. He moved on until he found what he was looking for, a barn at the edge of town. Inside, the smell of hay and soil filled the air. He collapsed in a corner, too tired to think, too hungry to feel. He woke to the sound of footsteps. An old woman stood in the doorway, holding a lantern. Her face was calm but not afraid. "You don't belong here," she said softly. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "I just need a little food. I'll leave by morning." The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Stay quiet." She returned later with bread and milk. He devoured them like a starving animal. She didn't ask questions. But before leaving, she said, "You have the eyes of someone who's seen too much." I once had a son with eyes like that. Her kindness broke something inside him. It had been so long since anyone had looked at him without suspicion or hatred. He wanted to thank her, but words failed him. At dawn, he slipped away again. He left a piece of his tattered sleeve on her doorstep, a silent thank you. By midday, he was deep in the woods again. The sound of planes echoed above. They were searching. He knew the army's methods. Drones, dogs, checkpoints. He was a marked man now. He moved east toward the mountains. He remembered maps from before his capture, remote valleys, hidden trails. If he could reach the border, he could vanish for good. But survival wasn't easy. The second night brought heavy rain. His firewood was soaked, his body shivering uncontrollably. He pressed himself against a rock for shelter, eyes open to the darkness. He thought of Merrick. Still in that camp. Still alive. Or maybe not. The guilt burned more than hunger ever could. "I'll come back," he whispered to the night. "I promised." The storm passed by morning, but so did his strength. His legs trembled with every step. His hands were bleeding from the cold. He found berries and ate them slowly, praying they weren't poisonous. As he walked, he saw footprints in the mud, fresh, deep, and wide apart. Soldiers. The hunt was close. He hid behind a fallen tree as voices grew near. He could hear their radios, the metallic clink of weapons. One of them spoke his name. They were no longer searching blindly, they knew he was here. He waited until their footsteps faded. Then he moved the other way, deeper into the forest. His mind began to blur from exhaustion and hunger. He couldn't tell if the whispering wind was real or just his own thoughts breaking apart. That night, he built a small fire inside a hollow cave. As the flames flickered, he stared into them and saw faces, Reyes laughing, Merrick shouting his name, the old man with sad eyes. They were all ghosts now, living only inside his memory. He whispered, "Why am I still here when they're not?" The fire answered only with a crackle. Sleep came like falling through ice. He dreamed of the camp again, of the chains, the shouting, the endless walls. He woke gasping, heart pounding. The fire had gone out. The air was thick with fog. Then he heard it. A distant engine. Trucks. They had found his trail again. He grabbed his things and ran. Branches whipped his face. The forest floor turned slippery. Behind him, dogs barked, soldiers shouted. The sound drew closer. He reached the riverbank and dove into the freezing water. The current dragged him, pulling him under, spinning him like a leaf. He kicked, gasping for air, until he surfaced downstream. His body screamed in pain, but he didn't stop swimming. When he finally crawled to shore, his hands were raw, his lungs burning. He collapsed among the reeds, staring at the sky. He was alive. Barely. But as he lay there, shivering, he realized something terrible. The river had carried him in the wrong direction, back toward the military zone. All that distance, all that pain, and he was right back where it all began. The thought almost broke him. Almost. But not completely. Because somewhere deep down, beneath the exhaustion and fear, something still refused to give up. He whispered to himself, "They can take everything. But they can't take my will." And with that, he stood up, drenched, trembling, and started walking again. The forest around him was silent, as if holding its breath. Somewhere behind him, the hunt continued. But Ethan had already made his choice. He would either live free, or die trying. Ethan walked for hours through the soaked earth, every step slower than the last. His body screamed for rest, but the thought of stopping felt more dangerous than the soldiers chasing him. The air smelled like wet pine and rust. Somewhere far behind, a dog barked once, then again. They were close. He had to keep moving. By late afternoon, he reached a road. Cracked asphalt, abandoned trucks, tire tracks half buried in mud. Civilization, or what was left of it. He crouched low, scanning the area. No movement. Just silence. He crossed quickly, his boots leaving faint imprints. On the other side, he spotted something that made his heart stutter, a small cabin, half hidden by the trees. Smoke rose from the chimney. Against every instinct screaming at him to stay away, he moved closer. As he approached, a figure stepped out. A man in civilian clothes. Older, strong, with eyes that studied Ethan carefully. "You're not from around here," the man said quietly. Ethan froze. "I'm just passing through." The man didn't smile. "Not many pass through here. And those who do don't come out of the forest half dead." Ethan said nothing. His mind raced. The man's stance wasn't that of a farmer. Too still. Too alert. After a long pause, the man sighed. "Come in. You'll die out here if you don't." Inside, the cabin was small but warm. The smell of stew filled the air. Ethan hesitated before sitting. "You can eat," the man said, handing him a bowl. "I won't ask questions." For the first time in days, Ethan felt heat on his skin, food in his stomach, and something dangerously close to peace. But that peace felt fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. "Name's Grayson," the man said. "Used to be Army. Retired now." Ethan froze mid-bite. "Army?" Grayson nodded. "Long time ago. Before all this madness started." He looked at Ethan carefully. "You remind me of someone." Same eyes. Same silence. Ethan avoided his gaze. "I've seen enough of war to last a lifetime." Grayson didn't press. "Then you know how it eats men alive." Night fell quickly. Rain returned, tapping gently on the roof. Grayson offered him a blanket. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow you'll need to move on." Ethan nodded, too exhausted to argue. He lay on the floor near the fire, the warmth numbing his pain. For a brief, dangerous moment, he let himself believe he might survive this. But peace never lasts long for hunted men. In the middle of the night, he woke to the sound of movement. Soft, deliberate. Someone whispering outside. Ethan's heart pounded. He sat up slowly, reaching for a piece of broken wood by the fireplace. The door creaked open. Grayson stood there, holding a flashlight. Behind him, 2 soldiers. Ethan's blood ran cold. Grayson looked at him with something like regret. "I didn't want to do this. But they offered me my old rank back if I helped." Ethan's voice broke. "You sold me out?" Grayson looked away. "Survival makes men do ugly things." The soldiers stepped forward. "Hands up." Ethan moved faster than they expected. He threw the piece of wood into the lantern, shattering it. Fire burst out, smoke filling the room. He lunged toward the back window, crashing through it. Glass sliced his arms, but he didn't stop. Bullets tore through the air as he ran into the darkness. One grazed his shoulder, another hit the tree beside him. He stumbled, blood dripping down his sleeve. Behind him, Grayson shouted orders. The soldiers gave chase. Ethan's mind burned with rage. Not at Grayson. Not even at the army. But at the world that turned trust into a death sentence. He ran until his legs gave out. He fell beside a creek, gasping. The rain washed his blood into the current, as if the earth itself was trying to erase him. He pressed a hand to his wound and whispered, "They'll have to kill me to stop me." Morning came gray and silent. He tore a strip from his shirt, bandaged the wound, and forced himself to stand. Every movement was agony. But he couldn't stop now, not after coming this far. He followed the creek for miles. Eventually, he came across something unexpected, a half-buried shack, rusted and forgotten. Inside, he found old supplies, a lantern, a canteen, and miraculously, a small pistol with 2 bullets. He sat in the corner, shaking from exhaustion. His reflection in the lantern glass startled him. The face staring back wasn't a soldier anymore, it was something else. Harder. Wilder. A man shaped by survival alone. He whispered to himself, "This ends when I decide it ends." That night he heard trucks again, closer this time. The soldiers were combing the valley. He could see the headlights cutting through the fog like knives. He knew what had to be done. He wouldn't run anymore. Not tonight. He used the last of his strength to set a trap: ropes, branches, mud. Crude but effective. He'd learned enough from his time in the field to know how to turn the forest into a weapon. When the soldiers entered the clearing, he waited in silence. The rain masked his breath. The first one tripped the wire, fell. Ethan moved like instinct, striking fast, taking one down, grabbing his rifle. Gunfire erupted. Shouts echoed. Chaos consumed the night. Ethan ran again, through smoke and trees, heart pounding. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He already knew what waited behind him: fire, confusion, and the ghost of his former self disappearing into the woods. By dawn, he was miles away again, bleeding, starving, half mad with exhaustion. But alive. And as the sun rose over the mountains, he finally saw it, the border fence. Rusted, tall, and covered in years of neglect. Beyond it, another world. He collapsed to his knees, staring at it through tears. Freedom was right there. Just one more step. But then, from behind him, came the sound of a gun being cocked. A voice said quietly, "Going somewhere, Lieutenant?" He froze. He knew that voice. Captain Voss? Ethan didn't turn around at first. He didn't have to. That voice had haunted his memories, his sleep, his very pulse. Captain Voss? The man who had commanded the prison, the one who'd made escape feel like sin, and pain feel like obedience. For a moment, all Ethan heard was his own breathing and the faint hum of rain dripping from the trees. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had brought him here. "You just don't stop running, do you?" Voss said, stepping out from behind the trees. His uniform was soaked, his pistol steady, his expression calm. 2 escapes. 2 miracles. And now here you are again. I should almost be impressed. Ethan said nothing. His eyes flicked from the pistol to the fence ahead, freedom, 10 meters away. Voss took another step closer. "You know, they call you a legend now. The ghost of Delta Camp. Soldiers whisper your name like a warning." He smiled faintly. "You made them believe one man could outsmart the system." Ethan's voice came low and hoarse. "Maybe the system deserved it." Voss tilted his head. "You still think you're a hero, don't you?" "I think I'm alive," Ethan said. "That's more than most of your men can say." Voss's face hardened. "You talk like survival means victory. But I see it in your eyes, you've lost more than I ever could take." Ethan's fingers twitched toward the small pistol hidden under his sleeve. He could feel its weight like a heartbeat. 2 bullets. 1 for defense, 1 for choice. Voss kept talking, circling slightly. "You had potential once. You could have been an officer. But you never understood the rules. You thought they were chains. They were protection." "Protection?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "You tortured men until they forgot their own names. They broke rules," Voss said simply. "I kept order." Ethan took a step closer. "You kept yourself safe behind walls while we rotted inside them." Voss raised his pistol slightly. "Don't move." Ethan froze. For a heartbeat, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then a distant sound, gunfire, faint, somewhere down the valley. Soldiers still searching. Time was running out. Voss's eyes flicked toward the sound for a second. That was all Ethan needed. He dove sideways, rolling through the mud, pulling the pistol free. A shot rang out, then another. Bark exploded beside him. He fired back, grazing Voss's shoulder. The captain stumbled, cursing, but didn't fall. "You never learn," Voss shouted. "You can't win against order." Ethan's voice came like a growl. "I don't need to win. I just need to be free." He fired again. The bullet tore through Voss's side. The captain dropped to one knee, gasping. Rain mixed with blood as he pressed a hand against the wound. Ethan approached slowly, gun still raised. "All those men you broke, all those lives you destroyed, was it worth it?" Voss looked up, pain etched deep into his face. You think freedom will save you? You'll still carry it. Every order you disobeyed. Every brother you lost. You'll never escape what you are. Ethan's voice softened. Maybe not. But at least I'll choose my own ghosts. He turned toward the fence. Each step felt like the closing of a lifetime. His hands trembled as he reached the rusted metal, grabbed hold, and began to climb. Behind him, Voss groaned, lifting his pistol with his last strength. You won't make it! Ethan stopped halfway up, rain dripping from his hair. Watch me! A gunshot split the air. For a second, everything went silent. Ethan froze. Then, slowly, he looked down, blood spreading across his side. The bullet had hit him just below the ribs. He kept climbing. One rung, then another. His vision blurred, but he didn't stop. Voss's voice echoed faintly behind him. You can't outrun who you are, Lieutenant! Ethan reached the top, his breath ragged. The world beyond the fence shimmered in the gray dawn, a new country, empty fields, freedom. He dropped down on the other side, landing hard. His knees buckled, pain tearing through him, but he didn't fall. Not yet. He turned back once, through the fence, and saw Voss still kneeling in the mud, blood pooling beneath him. For a long moment, their eyes met, two soldiers, broken in different ways, bound by the same war. Then Ethan turned away and walked into the mist. The rain fell harder. Every step felt heavier, his body fading. But his mind was clear. He was finally beyond their reach. As he walked, he whispered softly, almost to himself. They'll remember me as a ghost. But I was never trying to haunt them. I was just trying to live. The landscape blurred around him. The trees faded into white. And then, nothing but silence. The world woke slowly that morning. The storm had passed. The sky stretched pale and wide, like the calm after a long cry. Somewhere beyond the border, a local farmer found a man lying by the riverbank, clothes torn, body weak, blood dried to rust on his side. He was still breathing barely. His dog barked until the farmer came running. The man's name, written on the tag around his neck, was Ethan Cole. They carried him to a small cabin at the edge of the woods. A doctor came later, shaking his head. He's lucky, the doctor whispered. Or cursed. For days, Ethan drifted between worlds. Fever dreams of barbed wire and shouts. Of faces he couldn't save. Of Voss's eyes staring through the rain. But each time he woke, he saw something new, a roof not made of iron, air that smelled of pine instead of sweat, light instead of shadow. When his strength returned, he didn't speak for a long time. The farmer's wife left soup by his bed. The dog kept watch. One morning he finally asked, How far am I? 20 miles from the border, the farmer said. You crossed into freedom, son. You made it. Ethan looked down at his hands. The scars, the dirt, the blood, proof of a war that wouldn't end, even here. Freedom. The word felt heavy. Weeks passed. His wounds healed, but sleep never did. He'd wake at night to sounds that weren't there, chains rattling, boots echoing in the dark. And yet, every morning, he walked a little farther into the open fields, the sun rising a little higher. He found work fixing fences, carrying wood, helping rebuild homes that the war had taken apart. He never spoke of what he'd done. People just called him the quiet soldier. Years went by. The world changed. Borders moved, flags shifted, but some stories never made it into history books. His wasn't one of the tales told by generals or politicians. It lived in whispers, in rumors shared between old veterans around fires. They called him the man who escaped twice. The one who defied the impossible. The ghost who refused to die. But Ethan didn't care about legends. All he ever wanted was to stop running, from walls, from orders, from himself. One winter evening, decades later, a young reporter came to the village. She was writing about war prisoners and missing soldiers. When she heard about an old man living alone near the river, she followed the story. She found him sitting on a porch, carving a small wooden bird. His hair was white, his hands rough but steady. "Are you Ethan Cole?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "I used to be." She hesitated, then said, "Is it true? You escaped twice?" Ethan set down the carving. His eyes, still sharp, looked far away. "I didn't escape twice," he said quietly. "I just kept walking until I found something worth stopping for." The reporter leaned forward. "What was that?" He looked at the horizon. "Peace." She asked if she could tell his story. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he nodded once. "But not about me," he said. "Write about the ones who didn't make it. The ones who never got to cross the line." When she left, Ethan stood by the river for a long time. The water glimmered in the fading light. He opened his hand, and the small wooden bird rested there. He whispered, "You're free now," and let it go. It floated away, caught by the current, disappearing downstream. The next morning, the farmer's grandson found the porch empty, the chair rocking gently in the wind. Inside, on the table, lay a single note written in Ethan's uneven handwriting. "Freedom isn't a place. It's the moment you stop being afraid to live." They buried him on the hill overlooking the valley, beneath an old oak tree. No uniform. No medals. Just the wind and the sound of water nearby. Years later, when the story was finally published, people began leaving small wooden birds on war memorials across the country. Soldiers, families, strangers, they all seemed to understand, even if they never met him. Some called it tribute. Some called it closure. But to those who truly listened, it was something deeper. It was a promise. Because the man who escaped an army prison, twice, had never really escaped for himself. He'd escaped for everyone who couldn't. And though his name faded from records, his story lived on, told in quiet whispers, passed through generations. When the wind blew across the valley, some swore they could still hear it, soft, steady, defiant. "I'm free.